שבת אחים גם יחד, הנה מה טוב. שבת אחים גם יחד, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים. שבת אחים גם יחד, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים. שבת אחים גם יחד, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים. שבת אחים גם יחד, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים. שבת אחים גם יחד, הנה מה טוב, הנה מה טוב. יאללה לי, לה לה לי, לה 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 לי, הנה מה טוב, הנה מה טוב. יאללה לי, לה לה לי, לה 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 לי, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים. יאללה לי, לה 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 לי, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים. שבת אחים גם יחד, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים. שבת אחים גם יחד, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים. שבת אחים גם יחד.
Shabbat Shalom. That was very festive, Cantor Goldstein. Thank you. Surprising. We are so glad that you are with us wherever you are this Shabbat morning. We welcome you and are so glad you are here with us. We want to make sure you know how you can follow along with our prayers and with our Torah study this day. So if you are joining us through our streaming site on our website, you can access the text sheets and Torah study on our website, www.nsci.org/Shabbat. If you go onto that page and scroll down to the Shabbat Morning Experience, you'll see a link there for today's texts. If you are with us on Facebook, on our Facebook page this morning, you'll see in the chat that there is a link to those texts as well that you can click on and then follow along with us. So we invite you to pull those up. If you are joining us for the first time, we invite you to be comfortable, to read along with us when you like, to sing along with us when you like. If you prefer really just to watch, that's fine. If you prefer to participate and be engaged, that's absolutely fine too. Wherever it is that you are, however it is that you are, we are making a community together and glad you're here. So with no further ado, we'll begin with the first reading under Hine Ma Tov on our liturgy and text sheet. If you'd like, please join with me. Matter is never destroyed, only transformed. So too can the soul evolve higher and higher, from instinct to inspiration, haughtiness to holiness, selfishness to service, from individualism to union, to join with the soul of souls, the infinite one. As the soul is magnified and sanctified, so is the infinite one exalted. This way of beginning with a reflection on our souls brings us into the traditional understanding that each and every time we awaken anew each day, our soul is returned to us. But not only that, that each day we are offered the opportunity to elevate who we are, to elevate our soul, to come into unity and connectivity with everything that is around us. And so in that spirit, we move forward in our readings. The second reading on the page, please join with me. Love your neighbor as yourself, you said. And light blinded, we saw that inner and outer worlds are one, as you are one. You spoke and we wrote. We reached for you down the centuries, your light moving before us as we climbed, fell back, and climbed again, your Sinai of life. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher ba'amo Yisrael, be'ahava. Let's join together in Shema.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך. ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בישיבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
We continue now in the middle of page 2, moving forward to our gratitude for Shabbat. We can read together. On this holy Shabbat, may we draw nearer to life, to peace, and to joy. May we find true rest, holiness in our deeds, worth in our study of Torah. Let us feed on the love of goodness. Let us drink from the love of goodness, restrain our thirst for excess, and cleanse our hearts to serve life well. On this holy Shabbat, may we draw nearer in life, in peace, and in joy. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha, u'lecha na'eh lehodot. As we are together, we take the opportunity to create space and time for Mishaberach Lecholim to offer a prayer for healing for those in need of healing of body, healing of spirit, healing of mind, wholeness of body, wholeness of spirit, wholeness of mind. We, of course, think of all of those suffering with COVID-19, those at home, those in the hospital, their family members, their caretakers, all of the medical professionals, healthcare workers, everyone on the front lines out there in the world, helping to make this a world for us to still live in. We think of all of our own loved ones who are sick, suffering with physical illnesses, mental illnesses, people who feel broken, people in need of wholeness. We invite you, if you'd like to say the names of those for whom you pray aloud at this time, or if you'd like to enter their names into our chat so that we can raise them up with you in our collective prayer. May the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Leah, and Rachel, bless all of those in need of healing. Baruch atah Adonai, Rofei Cholim. Blessed are you, Adonai, source of healing, source of wholeness. We say together, Amen. Let's join together in Oseh Shalom.
Oseh Shalom bimromav, Uyase shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru. Amen.
So, as has become, I guess, our tradition, we turn now in the Shabbat morning experience to an opportunity for a little bit of Torah study, exploration of the Torah portion, exploration of how we might take it into our lives in our world today. You can follow along on pages 3 and 4 of the text and liturgy sheets. But before entering into study itself, let's join together in the blessing for Torah study, for busying ourselves in the study of Torah. It is in the box at the top of page 3. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. So, as has been the case for the last few weeks, we are in the book of Leviticus. And as I've mentioned before, and our other teachers have mentioned in previous weeks, you know, every week the book of Leviticus seems to speak more and more directly to us in our world. And who would have thought? So, but now we think and now we see. In many ways, this week's double Torah portion, Tazria Mitzorah, is literally talking to us. It speaks of what happens to a person and to a community when a highly contagious condition is contracted, the process of isolation, the process of quarantine that unfolds. And it also offers for us a picture of what re-entry into society might or should be for that person or that community. In many ways, in any other year when we've read this section of Torah, you know, we tend to understand it metaphorically, you know, bring it into some sort of larger esoteric sense. And we can certainly still do that. But we begin today, all of us, in a relationship immediately with this Torah portion that is immediate, it is connective, and it is real, because so many of us are experiencing either personally or know of others who are experiencing the fear of or contraction of a highly contagious illness, and the experience of going through that and what it is like to re-enter society. And we're understanding this, you know, as an entire society on a whole as well. So I invite you into our study this morning in that framework, just to invite yourself into making this as real and real time as possible. Although some of the texts you're going to read will sound strange in certain respects, I think in other respects they will ring so true. Cantor Goldstein, any initial thoughts just before we jump into the texts?
Well, I think you said it so well. How closely this mirrors our present day. I think in some ways we'll look back at this period when we have the ability to be a little more objective and look at this Torah and compare this portion, this series of portions, and say we had the roadmap in front of us. We had the guidebook. Why didn't we use it right from the beginning? Because had we used it, perhaps the results would have been different. And so it speaks volumes.
Yeah, absolutely. And perhaps whatever we haven't been able to accomplish so far, we will even now be able to do differently moving forward, in particular when it comes to the second half of the paradigm, this notion of re-entry and what a society after a healing process comes about can be built upon or should be built upon. And I think in that respect, there is some hope in it too. So let's jump in. We'll begin in Leviticus, the book of Leviticus, chapter 13. We're just reading a small excerpt from a much larger descriptive section, verses 43 through 46. The illness, this highly contagious illness that's described in this portion or these portions is called Sara'at. No one actually knows what Sara'at really was. What we do know is it affected the body, in particular the skin of a person. It was so contagious that it could be carried on their clothing and on their home itself, on the items, utensils in their home and walls of their home. So it's spread around. I don't know I should know based on how often I hear, different medical professionals talking about all these different contagion terms on television these days. But it was an illness of communal spread, I guess we would say. It was not just a contact-based illness. It was a communal spread illness. There are all sorts of different theories about what caused it to happen. Often Sara'at is translated, I would say mistranslated, as leprosy. What we just don't know what it was. What we know is it was highly contagious, notably unpleasant, and problematic, highly problematic and frightening for the sustaining of a society. And so the Torah spends a lot of time focused, in particular in these parshiot, about how one who gets Sara'at should be diagnosed, the treatment that should come, and how that should then play out. So I just want to read a little bit about that in Leviticus chapter 13, verses 43 through 46. So the text reads, "The priest shall examine him." And the priest in this time essentially functioning as the one to make the diagnosis, functioning basically as the medical professional, for lack of a better way to express that. If the swollen affection on the bald part in the front or at the back of his head is white, streaked with red, appearing like Sara'at on the skin, the person has Sara'at. He is impure, or the Hebrew for that is tameh. The priest shall pronounce him tameh, impure. As for the person with Sara'at, his clothes shall be torn, his head shall be left bare, shaved, and he shall cover over his upper lip, meaning put on a mask. He shall call out, tameh, tameh, impure, impure. He shall be impure as long as the disease is on him. He will dwell in isolation. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. So just on the surface, right? Again, just coming in this real-time frame, how familiar does this feel? Exhibiting presumptive diagnosis. If he's exhibiting signs, he has it, right? No test administered here. It's just the presumption of it means he has it. And then, or she, the person, and then the declaration of the diagnosis, essentially making the diagnosis known to whatever the larger system is. These rituals of then identifying the person, tearing the clothing, shaving of the head, wearing of a mask. And then the person, him or herself, has to name this condition by saying, I'm impure, I'm impure. It's as if they're saying, I'm sick, I'm sick. And then being sick or contagious or understood as possessing Sara'at, the understanding is as long as they are symptomatic, they have this, and therefore they will be isolated, living in a quarantine outside the mainstream of society. there are a lot of different, we're going to go a little bit deeper into some of the treatment of this person with Tzara'at, but I just think it's important to know how the sequence of events follows, how the diagnosis works, and then that different steps are taken to note them as different or separated in any number of ways, not only in terms of their location and isolation, but their physical presentation, along with then how they maintain some kind of agency in the situation by being the one to declare themselves impure. Note, it's not the priest who says this guy's impure, but it's the person themselves who says it. Cantor Goldstein, any thoughts, feedback on that? We have to sort of formalize this ping-ponging back and forth.
No, I think that it's particularly poignant that what you just said, that the priest isn't the one that declares it, it's the person, but they're not saying that they are broken or that they have sinned. They are just saying that they have this condition, and so the condition itself doesn't define the entirety of them. It only defines this one part of them, and I think that's important as we move forward in looking at the portion. You know, how very specific it is. It's not an all-inclusive thing, and it's not static. It changes over time.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. That idea of it not being static, of how it changes over time, is important in a number of ways. In particular, in order to understand that, I want to dive in a little more deeply into some of the description of what happens, of the treatment protocol that we just read about, and what it's similar to in other biblical references, because it gives us a little bit of an insight into how concerned they were in the Bible about this condition of tzara'at, how frightening it was for them. So I just want to draw you back a few chapters in Leviticus. This is written in smaller indented text underneath that Leviticus 13 quotation. This takes us back 3 chapters, and it is the description of how Aaron was to mourn after the death of his sons. This is the description of a mourning ritual. And so here the text reads, and Moses said to Aaron and his sons Eleazar and Itamar, do not bare your heads and do not rend your clothes, lest you die and anger strike the whole community, but your kinsmen, all the house of Israel, shall bewail the burning that God has wrought. So the part here to understand is this initial part. In the context of chapter 10, this is a restriction that's put upon Aaron and his sons about how they are to grieve. But what you learn from this is grieving rituals would normally involve tearing your clothing, baring your head, or shaving your head, or something to that extent. So we see here that when the person is diagnosed with tzara'at, they are brought into mourning rituals, right? The same rituals of shaving of the head or baring of the head, tearing of the clothing. But in this case, for whom are they mourning? For whom are they grieving? For themselves. It's as if there's a recognition in this text psychologically of what it must be like for the person who has been diagnosed with tzara'at. The concern that they must have for themselves, no less for society and what it may feel for them, right? So here, the one diagnosed is going through grieving rituals, and it's connected in some way to this line between life and death and what that means. And I just, before moving forward in that way, kind of want to bring us back into this reality we're in now. I can't speak for anyone else, but I know in my experience, first, tragically having walked this road of COVID-19 with families where COVID-19 has killed their loved ones horribly and quickly. how tenuous and terrifying the process is, and that the line for them between, the moment between diagnosis and, if it turns out that way, death is a small moment, but terrifying. I know how close and real that is for these families who are going through this in that respect. And we think about all of us in the larger circle of the world, walking in, I think it's fair to say, a lot of fear about, well, what does it mean if I go to the grocery store and inadvertently touch something that causes me or someone I love to get this thing that could kill me or someone else? The fear and the proximity of fear of death that comes with this reality. And I feel that that's really at play here in Leviticus 2, this sensitivity to, what does it mean to contract an illness that can kill you, that puts your well-being at such significant risk. And I don't say this to add fear. I say this simply to acknowledge the truth of the moment. And I think it's so real here in the text if you understand the nuance of what's happening.
I like that you brought in this text from Leviticus 10, where Aaron and his sons are told not to engage in the ritual because of the acts of Nadav and Avihu. But I think that the important takeaway for us is how important ritual can be in our lives, and when we're not able to engage in that ritual, that it leaves like a hole, a gap in us, and so finding ways to compensate for that can be difficult, and I'll let it at that.
That place when there isn't a place, when there's a gap, is you feel that here, which I think is important. I'll move forward. We're going to skip the Tikva Freimer-Kensky text just because we've already covered its material, but just so you know, Tikva Freimer-Kensky was such an important scholar here in the Chicago community for many years. She died, unfortunately, before her time, but was a biblical scholar par excellence, and she writes significantly about this, and her reflection on it here in this text is notable. So if this text study interests you, I invite you to read her framing. What I want to do now is bring us forward a little bit into what happens after. So the person has been diagnosed, they're quarantined for a period of 7 days, maybe 14 days, maybe longer. Interestingly enough, the same kind of like units of quarantine, week-long units, were applied back in Torah, just like they are applied today, which I think is another really powerful comparison. But after the Tzara'at has resolved, the Torah goes to explain this interesting ritual about re-entry, this re-entry that is to occur, and how it's to be performed. So if you look down on Leviticus 14 through 7, we're at the bottom of page 3, and just have you hear the words of this. So the priest comes back, and it says, the priest shall take some of the blood of the guilt offering, and the priest shall put it on the ridge of the right ear of the one who is being purified, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. The priest shall then take some of the log of oil and pour it into the palm of his own left hand. The priest shall dip his right finger in the oil that is in the palm of his left hand, and sprinkle some of the oil with his finger 7 times before God. Some of the oil left in his palm shall be put by the priest on the ridge of the right ear of the one being purified, on the thumb of his right hand, on the big toe of his right foot, over the blood of the guilt offering. Now, all of this very strange ancient ritual I don't want us to get bogged down in, well, what's with the thumbs and the sprinkles and the ears and the feet. What I want you to understand and see is the whole body experience and the interconnected body experience between the priest and the one who is healed and presumably being welcomed back into society. That there is a lot of contact happening here. Initially, you'll note the diagnosis was like a no contact diagnosis, right? If it looks like he has it, get him outside the camp. But here, re-entry is full of contact, and there are these rituals being performed with oil, with blood, which we should understand that as indicative of life force. That was the sign of that used in ritual sacrifice. Not as something that was icky or to be kept away, but something that was understood as holy, important, literally embodying life force. So here, all of this being utilized and kind of mixed together in this contact-filled experience. Reflections, thoughts, Cantor Goldstein, before we move to the next text?
No, I think we should do the next section because it brings it all into
Perfect.
focus.
Just want to make sure you have a chance. Okay, so flip the page. We'll go to page 4. Because what's really interesting is that just as when we heard about the diagnosis and the treatment of the one who was diagnosed, how there was a parallel to a larger context in Torah, the same here with this re-entry ritual. There is a parallel to something else introduced to us earlier in Torah. So we have to travel back to the previous book of Torah, to the book of Exodus, chapter 29. And I want you to listen here to the description of the ritual of the ordination of the priests. So it reads, slaughter the ram and take some of its blood and put it on the ridge of Aaron's right ear and on the ridges of his son's right ears and on the thumbs of their right hands and on the big toes of their right feet, and dash the rest of the blood against every side of the altar all around it. Take some of the blood that is on the altar and some of the anointing oil and sprinkle upon Aaron and his vestments, his clothing, and also upon his sons and his sons' vestments. Thus shall he and his vestments be holy, as well as his sons and his sons' vestments. So here, first of all, I hope you can see the striking resemblance between the healing ritual of re-entry for the Mitzorah, the one with Tzara'at, and the parallel to the ritual of the ordination of the priests, the holiest, arguably most important people in the biblical paradigm. So the priests, just from a context sense, were necessary because they were the intermediaries linking everybody else to God. No priests, no connection to God. And they were elevated in many senses throughout Torah, but in particular here, they are ordained through this high contact ritual: ears, toes, fingers, blood, oil. In very much the same way that the Mitzorah is brought back into society. So I wonder what you think about that. I wonder what reason you might think the Torah gives us in establishing this parallel. So for those of you here with us watching at home, feel free to give that some thought. Feel free to enter it into the chat, your own thoughts if you'd like. I think we'll take a minute to hear Cantor Goldstein's thoughts as well before coming back.
Well, to me, what it does is it says to the person who had been affected by the illness and to the community that their status is elevated, that they are somehow transformed from being the one that was separated out to now being a full and an important member of the community again. And while they might not be priests, because they would have used the right hand instead of the left if they were going to be priests, but they are still returned. And for me, I think one of the beautiful things about this is that, here we are, months past and months before Yom Kippur, and yet we have this sense of the journey from being tameh, being not pure, or maybe chet, of having sinned, and that is not a permanent state unless we choose it to be a permanent state. We can move from that state to wholeness, to a return of a sort, and in the case of sin, it's a return back to God through teshuvah. But in this case, it's a return back to the community through a process. So it's not, again, it's not static, as I said before.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that reflection for a number of reasons. In particular, bringing it into this sort of psychosocial frame that we might have of ourselves. How often, whether from a place of our own suffering from illness or our own choices and sinfulness, can we of ourselves feel that I'm going to be this way forever, right? This will never end. My isolation, my status of being punished, whatever it might be, that can feel for us very regularly like a permanent reality and can cause us to lose our will, to give up. And here the text is offering for us this reminder that it isn't forever. It will get better. In the case of sinning, we are the ones with the agency to determine when we want to make teshuvah, and it can get better whenever we're ready. In the case of the illness, it runs its course. But the text brings forward this powerful idea that when it's gone, not only will you be welcomed back into society, but you will be elevated when welcomed back, almost as if to equalize the separation and isolation you felt in the front, out from the front end. I think about, just again on a purely parallel physical comparison, everything we've known about these communicable, contagious, horrible diseases like SARS, for example. And when people who were diagnosed with SARS were better, when they survived it and tried to re-enter into society, many of them were pushed away. There was still this real stigma against them, even though they were fine and healed. And I wonder if Torah here is attempting to overcompensate by elevating the Mitzorah to the level of the priest, essentially to really message outwardly to society, we're not just saying he's okay to come back, we're saying he's like a priest. He's necessary for society. Just like you need the priest, if you, average person, are interested in connectivity with God, you need this person back in society if you, average person, are interested in having a society. And I love what that can tell us about how we need to be thinking already about what this is going to look like when it's over for us, when we are back in the homes of, or choosing to invite into our own homes, those who've suffered or have been near COVID-19. How are we going to get ourselves to elevate them in a way that we aren't fearful of them when we know it's safe? The text is clear that, when it isn't safe, when the contagion is still happening, the text is clear, society is protected, a quarantine has to happen. But the text is also clear that when it's over, they must be welcomed back and valued. And protections need to be put in place to make sure that the chasm between the isolation and the re-entry is not one that's unbridgeable. So I want to bring us into one final text, one of my very favorite texts from the Talmud that happens to focus in on this very initial text from Leviticus, which I think can serve for us as the bridge between this isolation and re-entry. So the text is exploring why in the Torah text in Leviticus does the person have to call out the word tameh twice? Why does the Mitzora have to say tameh, tameh? Why can't he just say, I'm impure, and that's enough? Why does he have to say it twice? So it reads, Rabbi Abahu said, the allusion is from here, and he shall call out tameh, tameh. We see here that the Mitzora calls out to the passerby and says to him, keep away, all right? The Gemara questions this interpretation. So the Gemara is asking, is the reason he's calling out tameh, tameh essentially to say to society, keep away from me, I'm contagious? Is this what does the verse come to teach this rule? Why this verse is needed for another rule, as was taught in the following Baraita, a section of rabbinic text not originally published in the Talmud, is what Baraita means. And he shall call out tameh, tameh. This teaches that the Mitzora must inform the public of his misfortune. Listen to this part. So that the public will beg on his behalf for mercy. Thus, the cry of tameh, tameh is not intended to alert the passerby to the existence of the tumah, the impurity, but to arouse their sympathy for the afflicted person. Okay, so hear that before we move forward. That the primary reason that the tameh, tameh is being called out isn't only that society should be aware that here is a person who has a contagious illness and is dangerous for society, but also, or perhaps even more, so that society will be aware that they are still obligated to remember this person, to feel sympathy for them, and to pray for them, so that they stay in the consciousness of society as a subject worthy of mercy and love. And then the Gemara responds, if it's so, then the verse merely instructs the Mitzora to elicit the public's sympathy. It should have written, and he shall call out tameh only once. What's the purpose of writing, and he shall call out tameh, tameh? Learn from this double expression 2 points. He informs others of his misfortune so that they will plead for mercy on his behalf, and he alerts them to his tumah so that he may keep away, so that they may keep away. So this isn't, it really brings to bear the tension that we all feel right now, which is, where do we value life the most? What is the risk? We hear a lot in the news all the time about the tensions between protecting life from being eliminated or threatened in COVID-19 versus protecting society and life and business and economy and everything else, which is also valued and understood as life. And here, the Gemara doesn't fall into the trap of saying, oh yes, it's very black and white, it's all quarantine, or it's all open the world again. It's a messy truth of both. Both are important. The value of the person not feeling alone and isolated, being connected still in society, and maintaining public health. And it holds both as equal truths. This resonates so strongly for me on so many levels. In particularly interpersonally, as this can be for us right now, the bridge that we are practicing so that whenever our world does begin to return to normal again, we aren't maintaining the separation of, an impure group of people who have been made lesser because of an illness versus everyone else, but that we can reintegrate into a society without fear of each other, and instead a society built on love for each other. Any final thoughts, reflections?
The notion of obligation that the society has, and it's somewhat, it's very interesting. It's an obligation, but they are not the ones that are acting. The action has to take place from the person who's affected. And if that person chooses not to take the action, then they remain tameh and they remain outside. And so they are doing the work, they are taking the action, and it's a foregone conclusion that the community is then obligated to embrace them upon their return. And to me, this is one of the most beautiful things about this notion of mercy, of acceptance, of embrace, when someone's returning because they've done what they needed to do. They took the time to heal and to become pure once again.
Yeah, I didn't think of that before. That and again, taking it back into the lens of a person who has been diagnosed with this very frightening condition, the Torah text gives them the agency to be the one to obligate the community. Because think how powerless someone feels when receiving any kind of diagnosis, no less a diagnosis that forces isolation. Just the utter rejection of any agency that they might have. And here our tradition says to them, no, you can say what is your truth. And in this case, that will catalyze the community's obligation to you, but you hold that power still in your hand. All of your power isn't taken away from you. You are still connected, and we give you voice. You can elevate your voice to make that connection possible. I love that that power is not taken away from the one who has otherwise been a victim in this scenario of illness.
And the permanence comes from inaction.
Yes.
Not because of the disease, but because
Yes.
they didn't act properly. So once they the action, then there's this transformation, and the journey continues, and so it flows. It flows from pure to impure back to pure.
Yeah. And it just reminds us, we are not our diseases. We are not our diagnoses. We are so much bigger, more complicated, more beautiful, more whole than any one thing. And here the text brings that through so powerfully. Thank you for that. I hadn't thought of it in that agency idea before. So I hope for all of you who are with us studying these texts that this not only brings depth and insight into our ancient texts, but brings our ancient texts into our own current experience to offer depth and insight for how we might respond now moving forward. I just think about what it would mean to already begin to think about how we can welcome and maintain connection with, despite our isolations, despite our separations, and how much stronger that bridge then will be for when we can all come back together again. So thank you for studying with us this morning. Cantor Goldstein, thank you for your reflections and insights.
Thank you.
We turn now, as we draw toward the end of our experience this morning, to memory, remembering those in our community who've died in recent days and those who died at this season in years past. This morning, we remember first those who died in the last 30 days, Rebecca Edelman, Luke Fraden, Dr. Lawrence Gotkin, Betty J. or Betts Handmacher, Jerome Harris, Alan Horowitz, Beatrice Mann, Thomas Miller, Merle Rose, Susan Sherman, Rosalind Claire Harteveld Stern, Mary Jane Wiersch, and Susan Zucro. We also remember those whose yahrzeits fall this week: Dean Allison, Rochelle D. Berlin, Nellie Berman, Esther Cherner, Norman Cohen, David Dahl, Libby Davis, Bertha Eisenschimmel, Leon Engel, Lori Enoch, Dr. Austin I. Fink, Joseph Freilich, Florence Friedstadt, Samuel Gingus, Abraham M. Golden, Dr. Sidney Morton Goldman, Helen Goldschmidt, Ruth Green, Arthur Greenstein, Marilyn J. Grossberg, Lawrence Heimlich, Charles H. Iskowich, Evelyn Karasik Kaplan, Jill Rachel Kaplan, Deborah Anita Coates, Thelma L. Kravitz, William Kravitz, Alan Lewis, Sidney H. Lieberstein, Rolf M. Lobel, Marcella Locke, Robert Allen Margolis, Samuel Merrick, Rose Mermelstein, Charlotte Padnos, Ida Passis, Harry Patinkin, Charlotte Portnoy, Judith Radzin, Lester Radzin, Ann Rosenberg, Barnett Ross, Julia Rothbart, Louis Rothschild, Minnie S. Rubin, Sandra Saltzman, Hilda Samuel, Norman B. Schreiber, Bob Shackno, Nettie Silverman, Ray Simon, Esther F. Sloan, Philip Sloan, Joseph Sondheimer, Iris Taylor, Thelma S. Wasserman, Ida Weiss, Lillian Kraus-Weiss, Frank Whiteman, Lori Ann Wood, Adolph Zola. Feel free to say aloud or type into our chat any names that we haven't mentioned this day, but those for whom you are praying and remembering. We'll join together in the words of Mourner's Kaddish, page 5. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, ve'alma divarach irutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon, v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, v'agalau v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lalmei almaya. Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitaseh, v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal, shemei d'kudsha brichu. Le'ela min kal birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma, v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim, aleinu v'al kal Yisrael, v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kal Yisrael, v'imru amen. Zichronam livracha, may all of their memories be blessings. We say together, amen. We thank you for being with us this morning. We look forward to seeing you this evening on Facebook at 7:30 for our Havdalah and Hootenanny. It's going to be great. And then keep your eyes out for our email on Sunday telling you about all of our upcoming events and opportunities to connect wherever you are. We hope that you are safe and well. We wish you good health and blessing. Our closing song will be Adon Olam. It is on page 6. Please join us.
Adon Olam Hashem Malach B'terem kol Yetzir Nivra Le'et Nasa B'chefzo kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Ve'acharech Yichlot HaKol Levado Yimlok Nora Ve'hu Haya Ve'hu Yeh Betifara Ve'hu Yeh Betifara Ve'hu Echad Ve'en Sheni Lehamshil Lo Lehachbira Beli Reishit Beli Taklit Velo Ha'oz Ve'hamisra Velo Ha'oz Ve'hamisra Ve'hu Eli Ve'chai Goali Ve'tzur Rechevli Be'etzara Ve'hu Nisi Umanosli Menat Kosi beyom ekra, menat kosi beyom ekra, beyado afkid ruchi, be'etishan ve'ayra, v'im ruchi geviati, Adonai li ve'lo ira, Adonai li Velo ira.
God is with me, I shall not fear. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.